Max, a German shepherd with a coat the color of autumn leaves and eyes full of ancient wisdom, was more than just a pet to the Millers. In his previous life, he had been a distinguished K9 officer, patrolling the city's toughest streets. He remembered the weight of his badge, the thrill of the siren, and the silent commands of his human partners. Now, those memories fueled his resolve. In his golden years, he found a new purpose in the quiet, snow-dusted mountains where Sarah and David had built their home. The bond between the retired officer and the couple was unbreakable, but it was the arrival of newborn Leo that truly completed Max's world. He took his role as a guardian with a solemnity that only a working dog could understand, spending hours lying beside the nursery door, his ears twitching at every soft stir from within. The winter was unlike any other. A record-breaking blizzard had descended upon the remote mountain region, burying the landscape under several feet of white powder. Their cabin, miles from any neighbor, was a sanctuary against the howling winds. Inside, the fire crackled, masking a much more sinister presence. As midnight struck, a silent killer began to seep through the floorboards. An old gas line, weakened by the shifting foundation of the frozen ground, had fractured. Carbon monoxide, odorless and tasteless, filled the rooms, casting a heavy, unnatural slumber over Sarah and David. The house, once full of warmth, became a tomb of silence as the toxic fumes rose. Max was the first to realize something was wrong. His instincts flared to life as the air grew thick and strange. He paced the bedroom, nudging David's hand and then Sarah's, but they remained unresponsive. Panic surged through the dog's chest, but his training taught him to think under pressure. From the nursery, he heard a sound that chilled his blood, the faint, struggling whimper of baby Leo. The infant's lungs were smaller, and the gas was affecting him faster. Max could feel lightheadedness clawing at his own senses, but he refused to succumb to the darkness that was claiming his masters. He knew the priority was the most vulnerable member of his pack. Max rushed to the nursery, finding the baby's face tinged with an alarming shade of blue. The dog knew his owners wouldn't wake up in time to save their child. In a moment of sheer desperation and brilliance, Max lunged at the nursery window. He slammed his powerful shoulders against the glass, shattering it to allow a rush of freezing, oxygen-rich air to swirl into the room. The glass sliced into his snout, leaving small crimson droplets on the white nursery floor, but he didn't flinch. The cold was brutal, but it cleared the air for a fleeting moment. Max saw a thick fleece blanket draped over the rocking chair. With the gentleness of a mother, he gathered the fabric around the baby, ensuring the infant was securely bundled. He used his teeth to tuck the edges, creating a warm cocoon for the shivering child. The cabin was a trap. With the blanket-wrapped bundle held firmly but tenderly in his jaws, Max navigated to the heavy front door. He stood on his hind legs, scratching at the metal handle until the latch finally clicked. The door swung open, and the full force of the blizzard slammed into him. The wind roared like a hungry beast, but the German shepherd didn't hesitate. He stepped out into the waist-deep snow, his heart pounding with a singular mission: to get Leo to safety. The sub-zero temperatures bit into his skin, but his determination kept him moving. He was 5 miles from help, and every second counted. The local sheriff, making rounds through the whiteout conditions to check on isolated residents, approached the Miller property. He stopped his truck when he noticed the front door hanging open, banging against the frame. As he stepped out, his flashlight beam caught something horrifying. Near the shattered nursery window was a trail of dark blood and tufts of German shepherd fur. The tracks led away from the house and into the freezing darkness of the mountain pass. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The sheriff called out for Max, but the only response was the screaming wind. He knew that whatever had happened in that cabin, A life-or-death race had already begun. The freezing wind whipped across the mountain pass, a relentless, invisible hand trying to push Max back toward the darkness of the cabin. He pushed forward, his massive paws sinking deep into the crystalline powder with every agonizing step. The weight of baby Leo, securely swaddled in the thick fleece blanket, felt heavier with each passing yard. His jaw muscles ached from the constant, careful grip, but he dared not loosen his hold even for a moment. The blizzard was a wall of white, blurring the horizon and erasing the trail back home. Behind him, his tracks were instantly swallowed by the drifting snow, leaving him alone in a frozen wilderness. His breath came in ragged, frosty clouds, and his once strong limbs trembled from the biting cold. Yet, the faint warmth of the infant against his muzzle acted like a compass. Pulling him toward the distant lights of the town he knew lay somewhere beyond the ridge. He was a creature of duty, and his duty was to survive for the sake of the life he carried. Halfway through the trek, the shadows of the forest began to move. A pack of coyotes, emboldened by the storm and the scent of blood from Max's wounded snout, emerged from the tree line. They circled him, their yellow eyes gleaming with predatory intent. Max's police training flared. He couldn't fight them, not while he carried the precious bundle, but he could intimidate. He planted his feet wide, his hackles rising like a row of jagged peaks along his spine. A low, thunderous growl vibrated deep within his chest, a sound so primal and threatening that it cut through the howling wind. He stood his ground, a guardian of flesh and fur, refusing to yield an inch. The coyotes, recognizing the sheer power of a veteran warrior who had nothing left to lose, eventually retreated back into the gloom, leaving him to continue his desperate pilgrimage through the snow. His legs were numb, and the ice was beginning to crust over his eyes, but he refused to falter. By the time the faint blue glow of the hospital emergency sign appeared through the haze, Max was running on nothing but pure, unadulterated willpower. His fur was matted with ice, and his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every fiber of his being screamed for rest, but the baby's whimpers had long since stopped, replaced by a silence that terrified the old dog. He dragged his frozen body across the asphalt of the parking lot, his claws scraping against the salt-covered pavement. The automatic doors of the small-town hospital sensed his approach and slid open with a soft hiss, inviting the freezing mountain air and a bloodied, shivering creature into the sterile, brightly lit lobby. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, a time when the hospital was usually a tomb of quiet efficiency. Dr. Aris was at the nursing station reviewing charts when the sudden blast of cold air caught his attention. He looked up, expecting an ambulance crew or a panicked parent, but instead he saw a sight that would haunt his dreams for years. A massive German shepherd, its coat white with frost and red with dried blood, stood swaying in the center of the room. At first, the doctor's medical instincts flared with caution, fearing a stray animal had wandered in. But then he saw it, the flash of pink fleece held delicately in the dog's mouth. The animal wasn't an intruder. He was a messenger of life. Max saw the man in the white coat and knew his journey was over. He didn't have the strength to bark or even stand any longer. With the last of his energy, he crawled toward the doctor's feet, his belly dragging on the cold linoleum. He gently lowered his head and released the bundle, the pink blanket unfolding slightly to reveal the pale, tiny face of baby Leo. Max gave one final, weary lick to the child's forehead before his legs gave out completely. He collapsed onto his side, his eyes fluttering shut as the darkness he had fought so hard finally claimed him. He had done his part. The medical team moved with frantic speed. Dr. Aris scooped up the infant, shouting for oxygen and a crash cart. The baby was ice-cold and barely breathing, his skin a ghostly shade of grey from the carbon monoxide poisoning. As the nurses rushed Leo toward the trauma room, a small, crinkled piece of paper fell from the folds of the fleece blanket. Dr. Aris paused for a split second to retrieve it, his hands shaking. It was a handwritten note, tucked away by Sarah's foresight weeks ago, containing the family's emergency information and their remote address. But as the doctor's eyes scanned the paper, his heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a bridge to a past he had never forgotten, and the dog lying unconscious on the floor was the key to a debt he could never fully repay. Dr. Aris did not waste a single second. He placed baby Leo into the hyperbaric oxygen chamber, the only hope for purging the lethal carbon monoxide from the infant's tiny lungs. The machines hummed with a clinical, steady rhythm that countered the frantic pounding in the doctor's heart. He watched the monitors, waiting for the oxygen levels to climb out of the danger zone. Every tick of the wall clock felt like a hammer blow. When the infant finally let out a thin, sharp wail of protest, the tension in the room snapped. Dr. Aris wiped a bead of cold sweat from his brow, his hands trembling with relief. He knew the grim math. If Max had arrived 5 minutes later, the brain damage would have been irreversible, and the child would have slipped away into a permanent sleep. While the medical team focused on the child, the sheriff was already mobilizing. Using the address from the note that fell from the blanket and the identification tags on Max's worn collar, search and rescue teams battled through the remaining fury of the blizzard. They found the Miller cabin exactly as Max had left it. The front door ajar, the nursery window shattered, and a deadly silence hanging in the air. Sarah and David were found slumped in their bed, their breathing shallow and ragged. The sheriff's team acted quickly, dragging them into the fresh air and administering oxygen before rushing them to the hospital. The timing was miraculous. The gas leak had reached a concentration that would have been fatal for the parents within the hour. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered peaks in pale violet, Dr. Aris returned to the lobby where a veterinary team was tending to Max. The old dog was hooked to an IV, his frozen paws wrapped in warm bandages. As the doctor looked into the shepherd's weary, half-closed eyes, a memory from a decade ago surged forward. He remembered a dark alley, a cold gun barrel against his temple, and the sudden, blurred streak of muscle that had neutralized the attacker before a shot could be fired. That K-9 officer had been Max. The realization hit Aris with the force of a physical blow. The dog who had saved his life during a robbery 10 years ago had returned, older and scarred, to give him the chance to save another life in return. The debt of a decade had come full circle. News of the guardian shepherd spread through the town like wildfire. While Max recovered from severe frostbite and exhaustion, the local community rallied around the Miller family. 2 days later, Sarah and David, still weak but fully conscious, were wheeled into the pediatric ward. The moment they saw Leo, healthy and pink-cheeked in his bassinet, the room filled with the sound of joyous sobbing. But the reunion wasn't complete until the sheriff led a limping but proud Max into the room. The dog let out a soft, low whine and rested his heavy head on Sarah's lap. Max had walked through hell to keep his pack whole, and his reward was the touch of the hands he loved most. A week later, the town square was packed for a special ceremony. The mayor knelt in the snow to hang a gleaming gold medal of bravery around Max's neck. The retired police dog sat tall, his grey muzzle lifted high. Before the ceremony ended, Dr. Aris handed Sarah the crinkled piece of paper that had fallen from Leo's blanket. It wasn't a note she had prepared for that night. It was an emergency contact list she had pinned to the refrigerator weeks earlier. In the chaos of the gas leak, Max hadn't just grabbed the baby. He had possessed the presence of mind to snag the one piece of paper that would tell the rescuers where to go. Max truly was the ultimate guardian, a silent warrior whose devotion knew no bounds. His legend would grow in their hearts.